You have been lied to for 17 years. If you think Cars is just a wholesome story about racing, you are missing the biological horror hiding under the hood. This isn't a world of replaceable parts. It is a nightmare where machines don't just break, they rot. In this universe, characters do not just break down, they age, they rot from the inside out, and they die. Most people watched the transition from the first movie to the sequels and simply accepted that Doc Hudson was gone. We were told he passed away, and we assumed it was peaceful. We assumed it was just old age. But if you actually analyze the deleted scenes, the biological lore confirmed by the creators, and the terrifying medical history of this world, you realize that Doc Hudson didn't just fade away. He suffered a catastrophic, agonizing physical failure that the studio was too scared to show you. Today, we are going to deconstruct the entire life cycle of the Cars universe. We are going to look at why these machines have tongues, why they feel pain, and how the very thing that made Doc Hudson a legend is exactly what killed him. We need to talk about the anatomy of a car's soul and the brutal truth about what happens when an engine stops for the last time. But to understand how Doc died, you first have to understand what he actually was. Because these are not just cars. If you look closely at the design, at the way they move, you start to see the cracks in the family-friendly facade. Jay Ward, the creative director of the franchise, once admitted something that changes everything. He explained that the reason you never see the doors of the cars open is because if they did, the biological innards would spill out. Think about that. The metal chassis is not their body, it is their skin. And underneath that skin is a complex, fragile organism that is susceptible to disease and decay. This changes the way you view every single scene. When you see a character rusting in the background, you aren't looking at surface damage, you are looking at necrosis. You are looking at a living being that is slowly decomposing while still conscious. This is the nightmare fuel that drives the stakes of this universe. It means that every race isn't just a sport, it is a fight against their own expiration date. And no one fought that battle harder, or lost it more tragically, than the fabulous Hudson Hornet. Before we dissect his final moments, we have to look at the evidence of mortality that has been sitting right in front of our faces the entire time. We need to look at the graveyards. To understand the true nature of the end in this universe, we have to look at what the studio tried to hide from us. There is a deleted sequence from the first movie, a scene known simply as the Lost Graveyard. It was cut because it was deemed too frightening for the target demographic, but it remains canon to the lore. In this sequence, as McQueen is lost in the dark, he stumbles upon a forest clearing filled with the hollowed-out shells of former vehicles. These were not just parked cars, they were corpses. The animation test showed vines growing through their hoods and trees piercing their chassis. It confirmed that in this world, when a character ceases to function, they do not just get sent to a scrapyard to be recycled, they decompose. Their bodies are left to rot and be reclaimed by nature, just like a biological organism. This scene alone proves that the metal on the outside is merely a shell, a protective layer for something much more fragile underneath. This aligns perfectly with the disturbing comments made by the franchise's creative director regarding the anatomy of these creatures. He confirmed that the reason the doors never open is because the biological components, the brain, the eyes, and the nervous system, are fused inside the cabin. If the doors were to open, the life force would spill out. This implies that the car is essentially a mechanical exoskeleton protecting a soft, vulnerable core. This biological reality recontextualizes everything we know about their aging process. Take rust, for example. In our world, rust is an annoyance. It is surface damage. But in the world of cars, rust is a degenerative disease. It is their version of necrosis or severe bone decay. When you see a character like Mater or the old townsfolk covered in rust, you are not looking at a dirty vehicle. You are looking at a character battling a chronic, terminal condition. This is why the product Rust Ease is so critical to the plot. It is not car wax, it is medicine. It is a pharmaceutical ointment designed to slow down the biological breakdown of their skin. Every time McQueen promotes it, he is effectively selling life support to an aging population that is terrified of falling apart. But the most critical organ, the one that dictates life and death, is the engine. The engine is not just a power source, it is the heart and the soul combined. We have seen evidence of this in the second movie, where villains use electromagnetic pulses to overheat engines, causing them to explode from the inside. This is the equivalent of a massive cardiac event. If the engine block cracks, or if the piston seize, the character does not just stop moving, they cease to exist. And this specific biological vulnerability, the fragility of the engine under high stress, is exactly what sealed the fate of the fabulous Hudson Hornet. He didn't just get old, he pushed a damaged heart beyond its limit. To understand exactly how that happened, we have to look at his medical history, starting with the crash that changed everything. If biology is the slow killer, then we have to talk about the fast one: violence. While the first movie showed us the quiet tragedy of aging, the second movie, Cars 2, did something radically different. It turned the franchise into a high-stakes espionage thriller that completely removed the safety wheels. Critics hated it, but for lore hunters, it is the most important piece of evidence we have. This film confirms that these characters are not just susceptible to rust, they can be physically destroyed by other cars. If you analyze the background of the sequel, the count of terminated characters is staggering. We are talking about over 24 confirmed eliminations in a single film. And these aren't just off-screen disappearances, they are graphic. Take the fate of Agent Leland Turbo. Early in the film, we don't just find his body, we see him compressed into a perfect metal cube. In our world, that is a scrap metal process. In their world, that is a body being crushed while the lights are still on. It proves that their metal skin offers zero protection against industrial force. But the most disturbing scene, and the one that connects directly to Doc Hudson, involves the American agent Rod Redline. He is captured by the criminal organization and strapped to an interrogation device. They don't cut his brakes or slash his tires, they go for the internal organs. They fill his tank with unstable fuel and expose him to an electromagnetic pulse. Watch that scene again. The pulse causes his internal fluids to boil. His temperature spikes. He is panicking, sweating oil, and gasping for air. This is not a mechanical breakdown. This is a biological heart attack induced by stress. The villains explicitly state that the pressure will cause his engine block to crack. And when it finally happens, he is gone. This confirms the most critical rule of this universe. The engine is the heart. If the engine explodes, there is no coming back. You cannot just swap it out because the personality, the soul, and the memories are tied to that specific block. This fragility explains why their world is so militarized. Have you ever looked closely at Sarge? He is a 1942 Willys Jeep. His license plate references the year the United States entered the Second World War. In the spin-off, Planes, we learn about the Pacific Theater and entire squadrons that never returned. This means their world has a history of global conflict, of devastating wars where thousands of sentient machines were wiped out. They have a concept of veterans. They have a concept of loss. They know that life can be taken away in an instant. So, we have established that they rot like organic beings, and they can be eliminated like soldiers. But there is one final horror, a fate worse than death, that was almost the plot of the third movie. A fate that proves just how desperate they are to keep their engines running. We need to talk about the surgery. The most terrifying question in this entire franchise is not how they die, but what happens if they are forced to live in the wrong body. If the engine is the heart and the chassis is just a metal suit, then what happens if you take the engine out? There is a deleted sequence from the very first film titled Community Service that answers this, and it is pure psychological horror. In this scene, Lightning McQueen has a nightmare. He wakes up, but he is not in his own red aerodynamic body. He looks down and realizes his engine has been surgically removed and placed inside Bessie, the massive road paving machine. He tries to scream, he tries to run, but he is trapped in a heavy, slow, industrial shell. He is still McQueen on the inside. His memories, his voice, his fear are all intact, but he has been grafted into a prison of iron. This confirms the single most disturbing fact about their biology. The car you see is just a vessel. The true living being is the motor block hidden inside. And if that motor can be moved, then their identity can be stolen. This concept was almost the entire plot of Cars 3. In the early drafts of the script, before the story changed to focus on mentorship, there was a villain named Gerald. Gerald was not just a rival racer, he was a body snatcher. His plan was to kidnap McQueen and perform a forced surgical procedure, an engine transplant. He wanted to take his own failing older engine and put it into McQueen's prime athletic body. Think about the implications of that. In this universe, identity theft is not financial, it is physical. If the villains had succeeded, the hero we know would have been trapped in a decaying, broken shell, watching a stranger live his life, drive his tires, and speak with his grill. It is a level of existential dread that belongs in a science fiction thriller, not a family matinee. And this is the key to understanding Doc Hudson. When we look back at the crash of 1954, we usually think of it as a career-ending injury. But based on everything we now know about their anatomy, it was much worse. It wasn't just a tumble down a hill, it was catastrophic internal trauma. The crash didn't just dent his fenders, it compromised his core. His engine block, the very seat of his soul, sustained permanent, irreversible damage. He didn't retire because he wanted to. He retired because his biological system was shattered. He spent 50 years in Radiator Springs not just hiding, but healing. He was living with a chronic, terminal condition, keeping his RPMs low to preserve what little structural integrity he had left. He was a broken man inside a polished shell. And then he met a rookie who convinced him to push that broken heart to the limit one last time. And that decision is exactly what led to the final, fatal event the studio refused to animate. Doc Hudson spent 50 years in Radiator Springs doing everything he could to keep his engine quiet. We looked at him and saw a grumpy old judge who wanted to be left alone. But now, looking at the biological reality of this universe, we can see what he really was. He was a patient in hiding. He knew his internal damage was permanent. He knew his racing days were over. Not just because of the crash in '54, but because his body physically could not handle the stress of the track anymore. Every day he spent driving slowly through town, every day he spent sitting in his garage, he was preserving what little life he had left. He was extending his timeline. Then, Lightning McQueen showed up. For the first time in half a century, Doc felt something spark in his cylinders. He saw a kid who was just as talented and just as reckless as he used to be. And he made a choice, a fatal choice. He decided to stop preserving his life and start using it again. Think about the training montage in the first movie. Doc isn't just shouting instructions from the sidelines. He is on the dirt. He is drifting. He is pushing his tachometer into the red zone to show the rookie how it is done. For a healthy car, that is a workout. For a car with Doc's medical history, that is a sacrifice. Every single slide on that dirt track was shaving time off his clock. When he shows up at the Piston Cup as the crew chief, he is back in the high-octane environment that destroyed him the first time. The noise, the fumes, the stress. He did it because he loved the kid. He did it because he found a purpose that was worth more to him than just surviving. He traded his remaining years for McQueen's success. This is why the theory of his death is so heartbreaking. It wasn't a peaceful slip into the night. It was a mechanical payment coming due. His engine, the very core of his identity, had been pushed beyond its structural limit by the joy of racing one last time. He didn't die of old age. He died of exertion. And this brings us to the moment the cameras didn't show. The moment that explains why McQueen is so haunted in the third movie. We know Doc is gone, but thanks to leaked information from inside the studio, we now know exactly how it happened. And it wasn't in a hospital bed. It was on the track. According to archives and interviews with the creative team, the scene that was written, storyboarded, and recorded for the third movie takes place at Willie's Butte. It is a flashback. The sun is high. The dirt is flying. Lightning McQueen and Doc Hudson are racing side by side, just like they did in the first film. But this time, Doc isn't holding back. He is pushing his vintage engine to the absolute red line. He is feeling the wind in his grill one last time. He is happy. He is alive. And then, the sound changes. It starts with a stutter, a heavy, wet, coughing sound from under the hood. It is the sound of a piston failing, of a valve floating, of a biological heart giving out under the strain. Doc slows down. He doesn't crash. He simply rolls to a stop on the dirt. His engine shudders one last time, and then there is silence. He didn't run out of gas. He ran out of life. The creative director described this moment as the day your mentor dies right in front of you. It was intended to be the emotional core of the third film, explaining why McQueen was so terrified of retirement. He wasn't afraid of stopping. He was afraid of ending up like Doc. He was afraid that if he pushed too hard, his own biological clock would stop ticking. Pixar ultimately cut the scene. They decided it was too heavy, too real, and too traumatic for a theater full of children to watch a beloved character suffer a fatal cardiac event on screen. They chose to let him pass away quietly in the backstory. But the existence of this scene confirms the theory. Doc Hudson knew the risks. He knew his engine was damaged goods. He knew that every lap he took with the rookie was shortening his lifespan. And he did it anyway. He chose to burn out brightly rather than rust away in the dark. He sacrificed the quantity of his remaining years for the quality of his legacy. This changes the entire way we watch the franchise. When you see the trophies, the stadiums, and the merchandise, it all looks shiny and fun. But when you look closer, when you look at the rust, the dents, and the desperation in their eyes, you realize the truth. The universe of Cars is not a comedy. It is a tragedy about mortality. It is a story about living machines who know they are made of parts that will eventually fail, and who are desperately trying to find meaning before their engines go silent forever. Doc Hudson found that meaning, and in doing so, he paid the ultimate price. If you want to understand more about the lies we were told about this franchise, and the other dark secrets hiding in the background of your childhood favorites, you need to watch this video right here. It breaks down the 17-year deception that changed everything. Click it, and I will see you there.